A woman with nothing stood face to face with a man who trusted no one, and instead of begging, she looked him dead in the eye and dared him to throw her out. What happened next didn't just change her life. It shattered everything he thought he knew about power, control, and survival. This is a story about fear, fire, and the moment two people stopped running from their pasts and collided headfirst into something neither could predict. If you want to see how a single choice can rewrite an entire world, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, and let's begin. The wagon jolted hard over a rut in the frozen road, and Clara Whitmore bit down on her tongue to keep from crying out. Blood pooled warm and metallic in her mouth. She swallowed it and stared straight ahead, jaw set, fingers gripping the splintered edge of the wooden seat. The driver didn't look at her. He hadn't spoken a word since picking her up 3 miles back, just grunted when she'd asked if he was heading toward the Hale estate. Now he kept his eyes on the horses, reins slack in his weathered hands, face unreadable beneath a battered hat. Clara didn't care. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to survive. The landscape around them was brutal in its beauty. Endless fields of frost-scorched grass, skeletal trees clawing at a gray sky, mountains looming in the distance like silent sentinels. It was the kind of place that swallowed people whole, the kind of place where weakness got you killed. Clara had learned that lesson young. The wagon crested a hill, and suddenly the estate spread out before her like a fortress. Stone and timber, sprawling and severe, with smoke rising from 6 chimneys. Barns, stables, outbuildings, fences that stretched farther than she could see. It looked less like a home and more like a kingdom carved out of wilderness by sheer force of will. Her stomach twisted. This is it. No turning back now. The driver pulled the horses to a stop near the main house, set the brake, and finally turned to look at her. His eyes were pale, assessing. You sure about this? Clara met his gaze without flinching. I'm sure. He shrugged. Your funeral. She climbed down without waiting for help, her boots crunching on frozen gravel. The cold bit through her threadbare coat, but she didn't let herself shiver. Weakness invited predators. Always had. The front door opened before she reached it. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, silver-haired, spine straight as a rifle barrel. Her dress was simple but well-made, dark blue wool that spoke of money without flaunting it. Her face was lined with years, but her eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. Lady Eleanor Hale, the matriarch. Clara stopped 3 feet away and waited. Eleanor's gaze traveled over her slowly, taking in the worn coat, the scuffed boots, the carefully neutral expression. When their eyes met, something flickered in the older woman's face. Not pity, not quite approval either. Recognition, maybe, of something familiar. You're the girl from the letter, Eleanor said. Her voice was low, measured, with an edge that suggested she didn't waste words. Yes, ma'am. You're younger than I expected. I'm 22. You look 19. Clara lifted her chin slightly. I've been taking care of myself since I was 14. I know how to work. Eleanor's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. We'll see. She stepped aside, gesturing into the house. Come in. You'll freeze out here. Clara crossed the threshold into warmth and lamplight. The interior was as severe as the exterior, wood floors polished to a dull gleam, stone fireplace dominating one wall, furniture that looked built to last 100 years. No frills, no softness. Everything designed for function, endurance, a place that didn't forgive mistakes. You'll work under Mrs. Garrett, Eleanor said, leading her down a hallway. She runs the household. You do what she says when she says it, without argument. Understood? Yes, ma'am. You'll have a room in the staff quarters. Meals twice a day. Wages fair but not generous. If you steal, you're gone. If you cause trouble, you're gone. If you can't pull your weight, I'll pull my weight. Eleanor stopped walking and turned to face her. For a long moment, she just looked at Clara, really looked, the way most people didn't bother to, searching for cracks, for lies, for the thing that would prove this was a mistake. Clara held her ground. Finally, Eleanor nodded once. Mrs. Garrett will show you around. Don't disappoint me. I won't. Eleanor walked away without another word. her footsteps echoing down the hall. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Step 1. Get in the door. Done. Mrs. Garrett turned out to be a squat, brick-shaped woman with iron gray hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. Her apron was spotless. Her expression was not. "So you're the charity case," she said flatly, looking Clara up and down with obvious disapproval. Clara kept her face blank. "I'm here to work." "That remains to be seen." Mrs. Garrett turned and started walking, clearly expecting Clara to follow. "You'll start in the kitchens. Breakfast is at 6, lunch at noon, dinner at 7. You'll help with prep, serving, and cleanup. If there's time, you'll assist with laundry, mending, whatever else needs doing." "Understood." "You speak when spoken to. You don't gossip. You don't pry into family business. You keep your head down and do your job. This isn't some boarding house where everyone's your friend. This is the Hale estate, and Lady Eleanor runs it like a ship. Step out of line, you're overboard." "Got it." Mrs. Garrett shot her a look over her shoulder. "You always this quiet?" "Only when there's nothing worth saying." The older woman's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Maybe you'll last longer than the last one." "What happened to the last one?" "She got mouthy with the young master. Lasted 3 days." Clara's stomach dropped. "The young master?" "Adrian Hale, Lady Eleanor's son." Mrs. Garrett pushed open a door into a massive kitchen, stone counters, iron stove, copper pots hanging from hooks. A younger woman with flour-dusted hands looked up briefly, then went back to kneading dough. "He's got a temper and no patience for fools. Stay out of his way if you're smart." Clara nodded slowly. "I'll do that." But even as she said it, she knew it was probably a lie. People like her didn't get to stay out of anyone's way. They got noticed whether they wanted to or not. The first 2 days passed in a blur of work. Clara scrubbed pots, chopped vegetables, hauled water, swept floors, mended linens. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her back ached. Her feet throbbed. She didn't complain. The other staff, 3 women and 2 men, watched her with cautious curiosity. She caught them whispering when they thought she wasn't listening, but she didn't care. Let them talk. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to disappear. On the 3rd day, she met Adrian Hale. It happened in the main hall, late afternoon. Clara was carrying an armful of clean linens from the laundry when she heard voices, low, tense, the kind that meant an argument barely held in check. She should have turned around. She didn't. Instead, she moved quietly toward the doorway and paused just out of sight, listening. "Can't keep throwing money at the problem, Mother. The suppliers are bleeding us dry." The voice was male, rough-edged, with the kind of authority that didn't need to shout. "Then find better suppliers." That was Eleanor, calm and unbothered. "It's not that simple. They've got a monopoly on half the goods we need. If we push back, they'll cut us off entirely. Then make them need us more than we need them." A pause. Then a low, humorless laugh. "You make it sound easy." "Because it is. You're just too stubborn to see the solution. Or maybe the solution doesn't exist." Clara shifted her weight slightly, and the floorboard beneath her creaked. Silence. Then footsteps. Fast. Purposeful. Before she could move, a man appeared in the doorway, blocking her path. Adrian Hale. He was tall, easily 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of build that came from hard physical work, not leisure. Dark hair, slightly too long, falling across a face that looked carved from stone. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, eyes the color of storm clouds, currently fixed on her with something between annoyance and suspicion. He didn't look like someone who smiled often. He looked like someone who didn't trust easily. "Who the hell are you?" he said. Clara straightened her spine and met his gaze head on. "Clara Whitmore. I work here." His eyes narrowed. "Since when?" 3 days. He looked her over slowly, not the way men usually did, but like he was cataloging details, looking for flaws. "Threats. And what are you doing lurking outside this room?" "Carrying linens." She shifted the pile in her arms slightly, as if to prove the point. "I wasn't lurking." You were listening. I was walking. You were talking loud enough to hear. His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might yell, throw her out. Instead, he stepped closer, forcing her to tilt her head back to keep eye contact. Let me make something very clear, he said quietly. I don't care who brought you here or why. This estate operates on trust, discipline, and loyalty. If you can't offer all three, you're gone. If you eavesdrop, gossip, or stick your nose where it doesn't belong, you're gone. If you give me one reason to think you're a problem, I'm not a problem. You already are. Clara's pulse hammered in her throat, but she didn't back down. I didn't ask to be here. Your mother offered me work. I took it. That's all. Nothing is ever all with people like you. The words stung more than they should have. People like you. She'd heard variations of it her whole life. Too poor, too rough, too desperate, too easy to dismiss. She lifted her chin. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. No, Clara said quietly. You don't. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, neither willing to look away, neither willing to concede. Finally, Adrian stepped back. Stay out of my way. He turned and walked back into the room, leaving Clara standing in the hallway with her heart pounding and her hands shaking beneath the linens. She forced herself to move, to breathe, to keep walking. Stay out of his way. Right, like that was ever going to happen. That night, lying on the narrow cot in her tiny room, Clara stared at the ceiling and tried to quiet the storm in her chest. She'd known this wouldn't be easy. She'd known there would be people who didn't want her here, who would look at her and see nothing but trouble. She just hadn't expected it to feel like this. Adrian Hale didn't just distrust her. He hated her presence. She could see it in the way he looked at her, like she was a stray dog that had wandered in off the road, carrying fleas and disease. And maybe she was. Maybe she'd always been. But she wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until she had no other choice. The next few days were tense. Clara did her work, kept her head down, avoided Adrian as much as possible. But the estate wasn't that big, and eventually their paths crossed again. It happened in the stables. Clara had been sent to fetch eggs from the henhouse, but she'd taken a wrong turn and ended up near the horses instead. She was about to turn back when she heard it. A low, pained sound. She froze. Listened. There it was again. She followed the sound to one of the stalls and found a horse lying on its side, breathing hard, eyes rolling white with fear. Hey, Clara murmured, moving slowly. Hey, it's okay. The horse thrashed weakly, and Clara saw the problem. Its leg was caught in a tangle of rope, twisted at an angle that looked wrong. She dropped to her knees and started working at the knot, fingers clumsy with cold and urgency. What the hell are you doing? She didn't look up. Helping. Adrian appeared beside her, crouching down, his hands pushing hers aside. You don't know what you're doing. Move. The rope's cutting off circulation. I said move. Clara sat back on her heels, pulse racing, and watched as Adrian worked the knot free with quick, efficient movements. The horse kicked once, hard, and he barely flinched. When the rope finally came loose, the horse scrambled to its feet, shaking, and Adrian stepped back, breathing hard. He looked at Clara, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't be in here. I heard it in pain. So you thought you'd play hero? I thought I'd help. Adrian's jaw worked. For a moment she thought he might yell again. Instead, he just shook his head. You could have been kicked, killed. But I wasn't. That's not the point. Then what is? He stared at her, something shifting in his expression, something she couldn't name. The point is, you don't belong here. Clara stood slowly, brushing straw from her skirt. You've made that clear. Have I? Multiple times. He took a step closer. Then why are you still here? Because I don't have anywhere else to go. The words came out before she could stop them, raw, honest, stripped of the careful control she usually kept locked down. Adrian went still. For the first time since she'd met him, he didn't look angry. He looked something else. That's not my problem, he said finally. I know. You need to leave. I will. Eventually. When? When I'm ready. His eyes narrowed. You don't get to decide that. Clara held his gaze. Neither do you. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with something she didn't understand. Finally, Adrian turned and walked away without another word. Clara let out a shaky breath and leaned against the stall door, her legs suddenly weak. What the hell am I doing? A week passed. Then 2. Clara settled into a rhythm. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. She learned the routines, the quirks of the household, the unspoken rules. Mrs. Garrett warmed to her slightly, grudgingly admitting that Clara was a decent worker. The other staff stopped whispering. Adrian avoided her, or maybe she avoided him. It was hard to tell. But the tension didn't fade. If anything, it grew thicker, heavier, like a storm gathering on the horizon. And then, one cold morning in early March, everything changed. Clara was in the village, sent to pick up supplies from the general store. She'd just finished loading the wagon when she heard a voice she hadn't heard in 8 years. Well, well, look who it is! Her blood turned to ice. She turned slowly. Samuel Crow stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, a smirk on his face that made her stomach turn. Her stepfather. The man she'd run from. The man who'd made her childhood a living hell. Didn't think I'd find you, Samuel said, walking closer. But here you are, looking almost respectable. Clara's hands curled into fists at her sides. What do you want? Just saying hello. Can a man greet his stepdaughter? I'm not your stepdaughter. I haven't been for years. Samuel laughed, low, ugly. You think running away changes anything? You think you can just disappear and I'll forget? I think you should leave me alone. Or what? He stepped closer, and Clara forced herself not to back up. You gonna call for help? Who's gonna believe you, Clara? You're nobody. A runaway. A liar. I'm not lying. Aren't you? His eyes glittered with malice. Does your new employer know about your past? About the things you did? Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. I didn't do anything. That's not what I'll tell them. They won't believe you. Won't they? Samuel smiled, slow and cruel. I think they will, especially when I explain how you stole from me, how you destroyed my property, how you ran off in the night like a thief. That's a lie. Is it? Claire's throat closed. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Samuel leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. You've got 2 choices, girl. You come back with me now, quiet-like, and I'll let this go. Or I go to your employer and tell them exactly who you are, what you are. I'm not going anywhere with you. Then you're a fool. He turned and started walking toward the main street, clearly intending to make good on his threat. Clara's mind raced. She could run, disappear again, start over somewhere else. But she was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting men like Samuel control her life. So instead of running, she did something reckless. She followed him. Samuel was halfway to the Hale estate when Clara caught up to him. Wait, she said, breathless. He stopped, turning with that same smug smile. Changed your mind? No. Clara straightened her shoulders. I'm not running, and I'm not letting you ruin this for me. Samuel laughed. You think you have a choice? I think you're a coward who gets off on scaring people weaker than you. His smile vanished. Watch your mouth. Or what? You'll hit me? Go ahead. Do it in front of everyone. Let them see what kind of man you really are. Samuel's face darkened. You little... Clara. The voice cut through the air like a blade. Both of them turned. Adrian Hale stood 20 feet away, mounted on a black horse, his expression colder than the winter sky. Samuel straightened, suddenly cautious. Who the hell are you? Adrian dismounted slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving Samuel's face. I could ask you the same question. I'm her stepfather. That's not an answer. Samuel bristled. I don't owe you an explanation. You're on my land, threatening someone under my mother's protection. Adrian stepped closer and something in his posture changed, became dangerous. So yes, you do. Clara's heart hammered. She should say something, explain, but the words stuck in her throat. Samuel recovered quickly, his voice turning oily, persuasive. Look, I don't want trouble. I'm just here for the girl. She ran away from home years ago, stole from me. I've been looking for her ever since." "Is that true?" Adrian asked, his gaze shifting to Clara. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I left. I didn't steal anything." "She's lying," Samuel said smoothly. "She's a thief and a liar. Always has been." Adrian looked between them, his expression unreadable. Clara's stomach twisted. He's going to believe him. Of course he is. Why wouldn't he? But then Adrian did something she didn't expect. He turned back to Samuel and said very quietly, "Get off my land." Samuel blinked. "What?" "You heard me." "You don't understand. I understand perfectly." Adrian's voice was ice. "You're a bully who preys on people who can't fight back. And now you're trying to use fear and lies to drag someone back into your control." "That's not— I don't care." Adrian took another step forward. "You have 10 seconds to leave. If you're still here after that, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Samuel's face went red. "You can't." 5 seconds. For a moment, Clara thought Samuel might actually try to fight, but then he looked at Adrian, really looked, and whatever he saw there made him back down. "This isn't over," Samuel hissed. "Yes," Adrian said quietly. "It is." Samuel turned and stalked away, disappearing down the road. Clara stood frozen, her entire body shaking. Adrian turned to her. "Are you all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Did he hurt you?" She shook her head. Adrian exhaled slowly. "Good." They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Clara found her voice. "Why did you do that?" Adrian looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Because I don't like bullies." "You don't even like me." "No," he said, "I don't." The honesty of it stung, but Clara appreciated it more than any false comfort. "But," Adrian continued, "I know what it looks like when someone's running from something, and I know what it looks like when someone's trying to survive." He paused. "You're not a thief." It wasn't a question. Clara's throat tightened. "No." "Then that's all I need to know." He turned and walked back to his horse, mounting in one smooth motion. Clara watched him, something shifting in her chest, something she didn't have a name for. "Thank you," she said quietly. Adrian looked down at her, his expression softening just slightly. "Don't make me regret it." Then he rode away, leaving Clara standing in the middle of the road, her heart still racing, her hands still shaking. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. That night, Eleanor summoned Clara to her study. Clara stood in the doorway, hands clasped in front of her, waiting. Eleanor sat behind a massive oak desk, a ledger open in front of her. She didn't look up right away. Finally, she spoke. "Adrian told me what happened." Clara's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause—" "Stop." Eleanor looked up, her gaze sharp. "I'm not angry. I want the truth." Clara swallowed hard. "About what?" "About why you're here. About what you're running from." For a long moment, Clara didn't speak. She could lie, spin some story, protect herself, but she was tired of lying. "I left home when I was 14, she said quietly. "My mother died when I was 12. My stepfather, he wasn't a good man. He drank, got mean. I tried to stay, tried to make it work. But one night, She stopped, her throat closing. Eleanor waited. "He tried to sell me," Clara finished, "to a man twice my age, said it would settle a debt. I ran that night. Took nothing but the clothes on my back. I've been moving ever since." Silence. Then Eleanor closed the ledger and stood. "And you came here because I had nowhere else to go. Because I heard you were fair, that you gave people second chances." Clara lifted her chin. "I'm not asking for charity. I'll work. I'll earn my keep, but I won't go back. Not ever." Eleanor studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "You remind me of someone." "Who?" "Myself, 40 years ago." Eleanor walked around the desk, stopping in front of Clara. "You can stay, on one condition." "Anything." "Don't lie to me again. If you're in trouble, you come to me. Understood?" Clara's eyes burned. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Eleanor placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, briefly, gently. You're safe here. As long as you're honest, you're safe. Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Eleanor walked back to her desk. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be busy. Clara turned to leave, but paused at the door. Lady Eleanor? Yes? Thank you. Eleanor waved a hand dismissively. Thank me by proving you're worth the trouble. Clara smiled. Small, tentative, but real. I will. She left the study and walked back to her room, feeling lighter than she had in years. But as she lay down to sleep, her mind kept drifting back to one moment. Adrian standing between her and Samuel. I don't like bullies. She didn't know what it meant, didn't know if it changed anything. But for the first time since arriving at the Hale estate, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. The days that followed were different, subtly but unmistakably. Adrian didn't avoid her anymore. He didn't seek her out either, but when their paths crossed, he nodded. Sometimes even spoke, brief, clipped exchanges about work, weather, nothing important. But it was more than before. Clara noticed other changes too. The staff treated her differently, less like an outsider, more like someone who belonged. Mrs. Garrett actually smiled at her once. Twice, even. It felt fragile, temporary. But it felt good. Clara threw herself into her work with renewed energy. She learned quickly, adapted, found ways to make herself useful beyond the basic tasks. When supplies ran low, she negotiated better prices with the merchants. When equipment broke, she figured out how to fix it. When conflicts arose among the staff, she mediated quietly, without drama. She made herself indispensable. And slowly, the estate started to feel less like a hiding place and more like something else, something she didn't dare name yet. But the peace didn't last. It never did. 3 weeks after the confrontation with Samuel, Clara was in the village again, this time with Adrian. Eleanor had sent them both to meet with a supplier about a shipment of grain. Clara had expected Adrian to refuse her company, but he'd simply nodded when Eleanor suggested it. The meeting went smoothly. The supplier was reasonable, the terms fair. They loaded the wagon and started back toward the estate. They were halfway home when Adrian spoke. You handled that well. Clara glanced at him, surprised. The negotiation? Yes. I've had practice. Clearly. He was quiet for a moment. Where did you learn? Everywhere, nowhere. Clara shrugged. When you're on your own, you learn fast or you don't survive. Adrian nodded slowly. I can understand that. Clara looked at him more closely. Can you? His jaw tightened. More than you think. She wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression stopped her. They rode in silence for a while. Then Adrian said quietly, I owe you an apology. Clara blinked. For what? For assuming the worst. When you first arrived. I thought... He trailed off, shaking his head. It doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong. Clara's chest tightened. You weren't entirely wrong. I am trouble. Not the kind I thought. What kind did you think? Adrian's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. The kind that ruins everything. And now? Now I think you're the kind that fights for what matters. He looked at her directly. That's not trouble. That's survival. Clara's breath caught. Before she could respond, a shout echoed from behind them. They both turned. Samuel Crow stood in the middle of the road, flanked by 2 other men, rough-looking, armed with clubs. Clara's blood ran cold. Thought you could get rid of me that easy, Samuel called, his voice dripping with malice. Thought wrong. Adrian's hand moved to the rifle secured beside the seat. This is your last warning. Leave. Samuel laughed. Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of witnesses? He gestured to the men beside him. I don't think so. You'd be surprised what I'm willing to do. Would I? Samuel stepped closer. I think you're bluffing. I think you're a rich boy playing at being tough. But you're not. You're soft. Adrian dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. You really want to test that theory? For the first time, doubt flickered across Samuel's face, but he didn't back down. I want what's mine. The girl. She owes me. She owes you nothing. That's not for you to decide. Yes, Adrian said quietly. It is. He moved fast, faster than Clara expected. One moment he was standing still, the next he was in Samuel's face, the rifle leveled at his chest. Here's what's going to happen, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. You're going to turn around. You're going to leave this county, and you're never going to come near her again. Samuel's face went pale. You can't. I can. I will. Adrian's eyes were ice. And if you try this again, I won't stop at threats. Do you understand me? Silence. Then Samuel spat on the ground and turned, jerking his head at the other men. They followed, muttering under their breath. Adrian watched them go, the rifle still raised, until they disappeared over the hill. Then he lowered the weapon and turned to Clara. She was trembling, her hands fisted in her skirt. Are you all right? He asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Adrian stepped closer. He won't come back. How do you know? Because I meant what I said. His gaze was steady, unflinching. And he knows it. Clara's throat burned. Why are you doing this? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Because you deserve better than to spend your life looking over your shoulder. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not. He held her gaze. But I know enough. Something shifted between them in that moment, something fragile and new and terrifying. Clara didn't know what to do with it, so she did the only thing she could. She said, "Thank you." Adrian nodded once. Then he climbed back onto the wagon and offered her his hand. She took it, and together they rode back to the estate in silence. A different kind of silence than before. Not hostile, not wary, something else entirely. The ride back was quiet, but the silence felt different now, charged with something neither of them knew how to name. Clara's hands were still shaking when they reached the estate, and she hid them in the folds of her skirt as Adrian helped her down from the wagon. His grip was firm, steadying. When her boots hit the ground, he didn't let go immediately. "You're safe here," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Clara looked up at him, searching his face for the hostility that had been there weeks ago. It was gone, replaced by something she couldn't quite read. "I know," she said. He held her gaze for another beat, then released her hand and stepped back. "Go inside. Get warm." She nodded and turned toward the house, but his voice stopped her. "Clara." She looked back. "If he comes back, if anyone comes looking for you, you tell me. Immediately." It wasn't a request. "I will," she said. Adrian watched her until she disappeared through the door, then turned back to the wagon, his jaw tight. Clara stood in the hallway for a long moment, her heart still hammering, before Mrs. Garrett's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "There you are. I need those supplies sorted before dinner, not tomorrow." Clara blinked, shook herself, and got back to work. But the rest of the day, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Adrian had looked at Samuel, cold, unflinching, dangerous, like he'd meant every word, like he'd have pulled the trigger if he had to. And the strange, unsettling part was this. Clara believed him. Over the next week, Clara threw herself into work with a focus that bordered on obsessive. She woke before dawn, stayed up past midnight, took on tasks no one asked her to do. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from circling back to that moment on the road. The staff noticed. "You're going to work yourself into the ground," Mrs. Garrett said one afternoon, watching Clara scrub the already clean kitchen floor for the second time. "What's gotten into you?" "Nothing," Clara said, not looking up. "Just trying to be useful." "You're more than useful. You're making the rest of us look lazy." Mrs. Garrett planted her hands on her hips. "Take a break. Go for a walk. Do something that isn't work." "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." Clara paused, brushed dripping soapy water onto the stone. She looked up at the older woman, who was watching her with something closer to concern than irritation. "I just need to stay busy," Clara said quietly. Mrs. Garrett's expression softened, barely, but enough. "Staying busy and running yourself ragged are two different things. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Clara nodded slowly. Understood. Good. Now get out of my kitchen before I assign you something worse. Clara stood, rinsed the brush, and headed outside. The cold air hit her like a slap, but she welcomed it. It cleared her head, sharpened her focus. She walked without direction, just needing space, distance, air. She ended up near the stables. The horses were in the paddock, grazing peacefully. Clara leaned against the fence and watched them, letting the stillness settle over her. You're out here a lot. She didn't jump this time. She'd heard Adrian's footsteps on the gravel. It's quiet, she said. Adrian came to stand beside her, resting his forearms on the top rail. That's why I like it too. They stood in silence for a while. Then Adrian said, You've been working too hard. Clara glanced at him. How would you know? Because I've been watching. The honesty of it should have unnerved her. Instead, it felt something else. I like working, Clara said. There's a difference between liking it and using it to avoid thinking. She stiffened. I'm not. Yes, you are. Clara turned to face him fully. And what exactly do you think I'm avoiding? Adrian met her gaze without flinching. Whatever's keeping you up at night. Whatever's got you scrubbing floors that don't need scrubbing and taking on work no one asked you to do. Maybe I just want to prove I belong here. You already have. The words landed harder than she expected. Clara looked away, her throat tight. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Adrian's voice was quiet, steady. My mother wouldn't have kept you this long if you didn't, and the staff wouldn't follow your lead if you didn't earn it. I haven't earned anything. You're wrong, Clara shook her head. You hated me when I got here. You told me I didn't belong. You said I was a problem. I was wrong. She looked at him sharply. You don't get to just say that and expect it to fix things. I'm not trying to fix things. I'm telling you the truth. Adrian straightened, turning to face her fully. I judged you before I knew you. I saw what I expected to see instead of what was actually there. That was my mistake. Not yours. Clara's chest ached. Why does it matter? Because you matter. The words hung between them like something fragile and dangerous. Clara didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond to the raw honesty in his voice. So she did what she always did when things got too close, too real. She deflected. You don't even like me. Adrian's mouth quirked, almost a smile. I never said that. You didn't have to. You're right, I didn't like you, at first. He paused. But that changed. When? When you stood up to me instead of backing down. When you helped that horse even though you didn't have to. When you faced down your stepfather instead of running. He held her gaze. You're stubborn, reckless, and you don't know when to quit. But you're also brave and honest, and you don't let anyone push you around. Clara's breath caught. Those aren't compliments, aren't they? She didn't have an answer for that. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to keep eye contact. I know what it's like to not trust people, to keep everyone at arm's length because it's safer, to assume the worst because expecting the best only gets you hurt. Then you understand why I can't. I understand, he said quietly. But understanding doesn't change the fact that you're exhausting yourself trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. Clara's hands fisted at her sides. And what am I supposed to do instead? Stop running. The words hit like a punch. Clara took a step back, suddenly unable to breathe. I'm not running. Yes, you are. You've been running your whole life, from your stepfather, from your past, from yourself. Adrian's gaze was unflinching. And now you're running from this. From what? From the fact that you're safe, that you belong, that no one here is going to hurt you or throw you out or use you. He paused. From the fact that you don't have to fight anymore. Clara's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She turned away, her shoulders shaking. I need to get back to work. Clara, I said I need to get back to work. She walked away before he could stop her, before the cracks in her carefully constructed armor split wide open. Adrian didn't follow. That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling, Adrian's words echoing in her head. You don't have to fight anymore. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Fighting was all she knew. Survival, defense, keeping her guard up so high that nothing could get through. She didn't know how to stop, didn't know how to trust that this, the estate, the work, the fragile sense of belonging, wouldn't be ripped away the moment she let herself believe it was real, because everything always got ripped away eventually. She'd learned that lesson too many times to forget it now. That 2 days later, everything went to hell. It started with a delivery that never arrived. The estate relied on regular shipments of grain, feed, and supplies from a network of merchants in the surrounding towns. One of those merchants, a man named Garrett Finn, had been providing goods for years. Reliable, trustworthy. Until he wasn't. The shipment was supposed to arrive on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, there was still no sign of it. Eleanor sent Adrian to investigate. Clara, who'd been sorting inventory in the storage barn, overheard the conversation. "Something's wrong," Eleanor said, her voice tight with tension. "Finn's never late. Not once in 10 years. "Could be weather," Adrian said. "The roads have been rough. Or it could be something else." "Like what?" Eleanor didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was carefully controlled. "Go find out. Take someone with you." "Who?" "Clara." Adrian's eyes widened slightly. "Mother, she knows the merchants. She's been handling most of the negotiations for the past month. She'll notice things you won't." It's not a suggestion." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just nodded once and turned to leave. Clara, who'd been standing just out of sight, stepped into view. "I'm ready." Adrian looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Sure? You need someone who knows what to look for. That's me." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Let's go." The ride to Finn's trading post took an hour. The roads were rough, just like Adrian had said, but passable. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. When they arrived, the trading post looked abandoned. No smoke from the chimney, no horses in the paddock, no sign of life. Adrian dismounted first, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle. Clara followed, her pulse quickening. "Stay close," Adrian said. They approached the main building slowly. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. Adrian pushed it open with the barrel of the rifle. Inside, the place was a mess. Overturned tables, broken glass, papers scattered across the floor. "What the hell happened here?" Clara whispered. Adrian didn't answer. He moved deeper into the building, checking each room methodically. Clara followed, her heart hammering. They found Finn in the back office. He was slumped in a chair, his face bruised, one eye swollen shut, blood crusted on his lip. Clara gasped. Adrian moved fast, checking for a pulse. "He's alive." Finn groaned, his good eye flickering open. "Hale, what happened?" Adrian demanded. Finn coughed, wincing. "Dalton's men. Came 2 days ago, said I had to stop supplying you, said if I didn't..." He gestured weakly at his face. "This." Clara's stomach dropped. "Who's Dalton?" "Competitor," Adrian said grimly. "Runs a consortium out of the Eastern Valley. Been trying to squeeze us out for years." "Why now?" "Because he thinks we're vulnerable." Adrian's jaw tightened. "And he's not wrong." Finn coughed again. "They took the shipment, said it was payment for protection." "Protection from what?" Clara demanded. "From them." Finn's laugh was bitter, pained. "It's extortion, plain and simple. And they're hitting every supplier we work with." Adrian swore under his breath. "How many others?" "3 that I know of, maybe more." Clara's mind raced. If Dalton was cutting off their supply lines, the estate would be in serious trouble. No grain meant no feed for the animals. No feed meant livestock losses. Livestock losses meant financial ruin. "We need to get him to a doctor," Clara said. "No." Finn grabbed Adrian's arm. "You need to stop Dalton. If you don't, he'll destroy you." Adrian looked at Clara. "Can you get him to town?" "Alone?" "I need to handle this. Now." Clara's pulse spiked. "You can't go after Dalton by yourself. That's suicide." "I'm not asking for permission." "Adrian, this is my estate, my responsibility." His eyes were hard, unyielding. I'm not letting some two-bit thug dictate how we run things. Then let me come with you. No. Why not? Because it's too dangerous. Clara stepped closer, her voice dropping. And you think I haven't dealt with dangerous before? Adrian stared at her, something shifting in his expression. This isn't the same. Isn't it? Clara held his gaze. You're going up against someone who uses violence and intimidation to get what he wants. That sounds exactly like every man I've ever known, and I'm still standing. For a long moment, Adrian didn't speak. Then quietly, he said, If you come with me, you do exactly what I say. No arguments. Fine. I mean it, Clara. This isn't negotiable. I said fine. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but Finn groaned again, pulling their attention back. Get him to town first, Adrian said. Then we move. They got Finn to the doctor in half an hour. Clara stayed long enough to make sure he'd be all right, then met Adrian outside. Where's Dalton? She asked. He operates out of a warehouse on the north edge of town. Used to be a mill. Adrian checked his rifle. He's probably there now, likes to keep close to his operations. And you're just going to walk in and confront him? Something like that. Clara grabbed his arm. That's insane. You have a better idea? She did, actually. We don't go in guns blazing. We gather proof first. Evidence of the extortion, then we go to the authorities. Adrian shook his head. The authorities won't touch him. He's got half the county in his pocket. Then we go public. We expose him. Make it so he can't operate in the shadows anymore. And how do you suggest we do that? Clara's mind worked fast. We get the other suppliers to talk. Get them on record. Then we take it to the newspaper. The editor, Morrison, he's not corrupt. He'd print it. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. That could work. It will work. But we need to move fast before Dalton realizes what we're doing. Adrian nodded slowly. All right. We do it your way. But if things go south, they won't. If they do, Adrian continued, you run. You get out and you don't look back. Understood? Clara wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Understood. It took them 3 hours to track down the other suppliers. 2 of them refused to talk, too scared of Dalton's retaliation. But the third, a woman named Ruth who ran a textile operation, agreed. He's been bleeding me dry for months, Ruth said, her voice shaking with anger. Taking cuts of everything I sell. Threatening my family if I don't comply. I'm tired of it. Clara took notes while Adrian asked questions. By the time they left, they had enough testimony to build a case. But when they reached the newspaper office, Morrison was gone. Out of town, the assistant said. Won't be back until next week. Clara's heart sank. We can't wait a week. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then we don't wait. What are you suggesting? We go to Dalton, directly. We tell him we have evidence and we're going public unless he backs off. That's a bluff. He'll know we can't prove anything without Morrison. Then we make him believe we can. Adrian's eyes were hard. We make him think we have more than we do. Make him scared enough to back down. Clara stared at him. That's risky. Everything about this is risky. She couldn't argue with that. All right, she said. Let's do it. All right. Dalton's warehouse was exactly as Adrian described. An old mill converted into a storage facility, surrounded by a chain-link fence and guarded by 2 men who looked like they'd break bones for fun. Adrian and Clara approached on foot, hands visible, weapons holstered. The guards stepped forward, blocking their path. State your business, one of them growled. We're here to see Dalton, Adrian said calmly. He's busy. Tell him it's Adrian Hale. He'll want to hear what I have to say. The guards exchanged glances. One of them disappeared inside. The other stayed, watching them with cold eyes. 5 minutes later, the first guard returned. He'll see you, but you leave the guns. Adrian hesitated, then unbuckled his holster and handed it over. Clara did the same. They were led inside. The warehouse was dimly lit, filled with crates and machinery. At the far end, a man sat behind a makeshift desk, flanked by 2 more guards. Marcus Dalton. He was younger than Clara expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. He looked like someone who'd spent his life taking what he wanted and crushing anyone who stood in his way. Adrian Hale,
Dalton said, leaning back in his chair. "Didn't expect to see you here. Come to beg?" "No," Adrian said evenly. "I came to give you a chance." Dalton laughed. "A chance? For what?" "To walk away before this gets ugly." Dalton's smile widened. "You think you can threaten me? In my own place?" "I'm not threatening. I'm offering facts." Adrian stepped closer. "I know you've been extorting suppliers. I have testimony, evidence, and I'm taking it to the authorities." "The authorities?" Dalton's laugh was sharp, mocking. "You really think they'll do anything? Half of them are on my payroll. Then I'll go to the newspapers, make it public, let everyone know what you've been doing." Dalton's smile faded. "You're bluffing." "Most." Adrian pulled a folded paper from his coat, Ruth's testimony. "This is just one. I have 3 more. And once Morrison prints it, your operations are finished." Dalton's eyes narrowed. He gestured to one of the guards, who snatched the paper and brought it to him. He read it slowly. Then he looked up, his expression unreadable. "You've got guts, Hale. I'll give you that." "I don't want a war," Adrian said. "I want you to leave my suppliers alone, stop the extortion, walk away." Dalton tapped the paper against his desk. "And if I don't?" "Then I burn your operation to the ground, publicly, legally, and you spend the next decade in a cell." Silence. Then Dalton stood, his movement slow, deliberate. "You know what your problem is, Hale. You think the world works on rules, on fairness, on right and wrong." He stepped around the desk. "But it doesn't. The world works on power. And right now, I've got more of it than you." "That's where you're wrong," Clara said, speaking for the first time. Dalton's gaze shifted to her. "And who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows what it's like to be powerless, to be threatened, to be told to shut up and accept it." Clara stepped forward, her voice steady. "But here's the thing about people like you. You only have power as long as people are scared. The moment they stop being scared, you're nothing." Dalton's face darkened. "You've got a smart mouth, girl. And you've got a failing business model." Clara held his gaze. "Because fear only works until it doesn't, and we're not scared anymore." For a moment, Dalton looked genuinely surprised. Then he laughed, low, dangerous. "You've got fire. I'll give you that, but fire burns." He turned to his guards. "Get them out of here." The guards moved forward. Adrian tensed, ready to fight. But Clara did something unexpected. She pulled out a second piece of paper, one she'd written herself on the ride over, and held it up. "This is a statement," she said loudly, "signed by 5 suppliers detailing every extortion, every threat, every illegal move you've made in the past year. Morrison already has a copy. If we don't check in with him by tomorrow, he prints it. Front page." It was a complete bluff. Morrison didn't have anything. But Dalton didn't know that. His eyes flicked to the paper, then back to Clara. "You're lying." "Am I?" Clara's voice was ice. "You want to risk it?" Silence. Dalton's jaw worked. His hands curled into fists. Then slowly, he smiled. "Smart. Real smart." He looked at Adrian. "You've got yourself a good one there, Hale. Better keep her close." "Is that a yes?" Adrian demanded. Dalton shrugged. "I'll pull back, for now. But this isn't over." "Yes," Adrian said quietly. "It is." Dalton's smile didn't waver. "We'll see." He gestured to the guards. "Let them go." Clara and Adrian didn't wait. They walked out, grabbed their weapons, and kept walking until they were well clear of the warehouse. Only then did Clara let out the breath she'd been holding. "That was insane," Adrian said, his voice shaking slightly. "That was necessary," Clara corrected. He looked at her, something fierce and unreadable in his eyes. "You could have gotten us killed, but I didn't." "Clara, see, we won, Adrian. We actually won." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, he pulled her into a tight embrace. Clara froze, her heart hammering. "Don't ever do that again," Adrian said into her hair. Clara's throat tightened. "I can't promise that." "I know." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "But I'm asking anyway." They stood there, close enough to feel each other's heartbeat, the world narrowing to just the two of them. And for the first time in her life, Clara didn't feel the need to run. She felt anchored, safe, terrifyingly, impossibly safe. They stood there, close enough to feel each other's heartbeat, the world narrowing to just the two of them. And for the first time in her life, Clara didn't feel the need to run. She felt anchored, safe, terrifyingly, impossibly safe. Adrian's hands were still on her shoulders, his grip firm but not controlling. His eyes searched hers, looking for something she wasn't sure she could give. "We should go," Clara said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian nodded but didn't move. "Yeah." Neither of them stepped back. The moment stretched, fragile and electric, until the sound of footsteps on gravel shattered it. They broke apart just as one of Dalton's guards appeared around the corner of the building, watching them with narrowed eyes. "Move along," the guard said, his hand resting on the club at his belt. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. He took Clara's arm gently, carefully, and guided her toward the horses. They didn't speak until they were well down the road, the warehouse disappearing behind them. "That was too close," Adrian said finally. "But it worked." "This time," he glanced at her. "Dalton won't stay quiet for long. Men like him don't give up." "Then we make sure we're ready when he comes back." Adrian's mouth quirked slightly. "You sound like you're planning to stay." Clara's chest tightened. "I am, unless you want me gone." "No." The word came fast, certain. "I don't." They rode in silence after that, but it wasn't the tense, uncomfortable silence of before. It was something else, something that felt almost like understanding. When they reached the estate, Eleanor was waiting on the front steps, her expression tight with worry. "Well?" she demanded. Adrian dismounted and helped Clara down. "Dalton's backing off, for now." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" "What we had to," Clara said. Eleanor looked between them, reading something in their expressions that made her pause. Then she nodded slowly. "Come inside, both of you. We need to talk." But Eleanor's study felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in as she poured 3 glasses of whiskey and handed them out without asking if they wanted any. Clara took hers but didn't drink. "Start from the beginning," Eleanor said, settling into her chair with the air of someone preparing for battle. Adrian told her everything: Finn's beating, the extortion, the confrontation with Dalton, Clara's bluff. He didn't leave anything out. When he finished, Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tapping against her glass. "You took a significant risk," she said finally, her gaze fixed on Clara. "Yes, ma'am." "One that could have backfired spectacularly." "It didn't." Eleanor's lips twitched. "No, it didn't." She took a sip of whiskey. "But Dalton won't let this go. Men like him never do. They nurse grudges like mothers nurse infants." "We know," Adrian said. "Do you?" Eleanor's voice sharpened. "Because this isn't just about supplies anymore. You challenged him publicly, made him look weak. He'll come for you, both of you." Clara's stomach twisted, but she kept her face neutral. "Then we'll be ready." "Will you?" Eleanor leaned forward. "Because being ready means understanding what you're up against. Dalton has resources, connections, violence at his disposal, and he won't hesitate to use all of it." "Neither will we," Adrian said quietly. Eleanor looked at her son for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You've changed," Adrian frowned. "What?" "You. You've changed." Eleanor's gaze flicked to Clara, then back. "A year ago, you would have gone in alone, handled it with fists and fury, but you didn't. You brought her, listened to her, followed her plan." Adrian's jaw tightened. She was right. "I know." Eleanor's voice softened just slightly. "And that's what worries me." Clara frowned. "I don't understand." Eleanor turned to her. "My son has spent the last 5 years building walls, keeping everyone at arm's length, trusting no one." She paused. "But you've gotten through those walls, and that makes you dangerous. I'm not trying to—" "I know you're not." Eleanor's gaze was steady, assessing. "But it's happening anyway, and when those walls come down, what's left is vulnerable, exposed." She looked at Adrian. "And vulnerability gets people killed." The room went silent. Adrian set his glass down with more force than necessary. I'm not vulnerable. You are. Eleanor's voice was firm, and pretending otherwise won't change it. Adrian stood abruptly. I need air. He walked out without another word. Clara started to follow, but Eleanor's voice stopped her. Let him go. Clara turned back. He shouldn't be alone right now. He needs to be. Eleanor gestured to the chair Adrian had vacated. Sit. Clara hesitated, then sat. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. You care about him. It wasn't a question. Clara's throat tightened. I respect him. That's not what I asked. Clara looked down at her hands. I don't know what you want me to say. The truth would be a good start. Clara's chest ached. I don't know what the truth is. Eleanor's expression softened, just barely. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to admit it. Clara's hands curled into fists in her lap. I'm not afraid. Everyone's afraid of something, Clara. The question is whether you let that fear control you or whether you control it. I've spent my whole life controlling it. I know. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. But there's a difference between controlling fear and avoiding what you're afraid of. Clara looked up sharply. I'm not avoiding anything. Aren't you? Eleanor's gaze was penetrating. You work yourself to exhaustion. You take on tasks no one asks you to do. You throw yourself into danger without hesitation, all of it designed to keep you from sitting still long enough to feel anything. The words hit like a physical blow. Clara's vision blurred. That's not... It's exactly what you're doing. Eleanor's voice was gentle but unyielding, and I understand why. I did the same thing for years after my husband died. Buried myself in work so I wouldn't have to face the grief, the loneliness, the fear of letting anyone close enough to hurt me again. Clara's throat closed. But here's what I learned, Eleanor continued. Avoiding pain doesn't make it go away. It just makes it heavier, and eventually, that weight becomes too much to carry alone. I don't need anyone to carry it for me. No, but you're allowed to let someone stand beside you while you do. Clara blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. What if they leave? They might. Eleanor's voice was honest, unflinching. But what if they don't? Clara didn't have an answer for that. Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. My son is difficult, stubborn, guarded to the point of isolation, but he's also loyal, fierce, willing to fight for the people he cares about. She glanced back at Clara. And whether you're ready to admit it or not, you're one of those people now. Clara's heart hammered. He does. Eleanor's voice was firm. And if you're going to stay here, if you're going to be part of this family, you need to decide what that means. Because half measures won't work. Not with him, not with any of us. Clara stood on shaky legs. I need to think. Then think, but don't take too long. Eleanor's gaze was steady. Dalton won't wait for you to figure it out. Clara found Adrian in the stables, brushing down one of the horses with more force than necessary. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him work. You don't have to hide, Adrian said without turning around. Clara stepped inside. I'm not hiding. Could have fooled me. He moved to the horse's other side, still not looking at her. Your mother thinks I'm dangerous. Adrian's hand stilled. She said that? More or less. He was quiet for a moment, then quietly, she's not wrong. Clara's chest tightened. I'm not trying to be. I know. Adrian finally looked at her, his expression guarded. But it doesn't change the fact that you are. To who? To me. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's pulse hammered. Adrian. I don't let people in, Clara. I haven't in years. It's easier that way. Safer. He set the brush down and turned to face her fully. But you got in anyway. Without asking, without trying. And now I don't know what to do with that. Clara took a step closer. You could trust it. Trust what? Whatever this is. Adrian's laugh was sharp, bitter. You say that like it's easy. It's not. I know it's not. Clara's voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. But neither is what we're doing now, pretending we don't feel it, pretending it doesn't matter. And if I trust it and it falls apart, then it falls apart. But at least you tried. Adrian stared at her, something raw and unguarded in his eyes. You make it sound simple. It's the simplest thing in the world. You just have to choose it. And if I can't, Clara's throat tightened, then I'll understand and I'll leave. Because I'm not staying somewhere I'm not wanted. That's not... Adrian crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face. You're wanted. That's the problem. I want you here. I want you safe. I want you to stay. And that terrifies me.
Claire's breath caught. Why? Because wanting something means you can lose it. Or it means you can keep it. Adrian's thumb brushed across her cheek. You don't know that. Neither do you. For a moment, they just stood there, the air between them charged with everything unsaid. Then Adrian kissed her. It wasn't gentle or careful. It was desperate, fierce, like he was trying to prove something to both of them. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the 2 of them, heat and breath, and the pounding of hearts too long denied. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Neither do I. Then we figure it out together. Clara's eyes burned. Okay. Adrian pulled back just enough to look at her. But if Dalton comes after you because of me, he won't. We won't let him. Clara, I'm not running, Adrian.
Not from him. Not from you. Not from this. She held his gaze. I'm done running. Adrian's expression softened, something breaking open in his eyes. Good. Because I don't think I could let you go even if you tried. Well, the next 3 days passed in a strange, fragile peace. Clara and Adrian didn't talk about what had happened in the stables. They didn't need to. Something had shifted between them, something that didn't require words. They worked side by side during the day, their movements synchronized in a way that felt natural, inevitable. At night, they sat together by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. The staff noticed. Of course they did. Mrs. Garrett smirked knowingly every time Clara walked past. The other workers whispered behind their hands. Even Eleanor seemed satisfied, though she didn't comment. Clara tried not to think too hard about it, tried not to analyze or question or worry. But the peace didn't last. On the 4th day, Ruth arrived at the estate, her face pale, her hands shaking. He knows, she said the moment Eleanor let her in. Dalton knows I talked to you. Clara's stomach dropped. How? I don't know, but his men came to my shop this morning, destroyed half my inventory, threatened my daughter. Ruth's voice broke. He said if I don't recant my statement, he'll kill her. Eleanor's face went hard. Where's your daughter now? Safe. I sent her to my sister's in the next county, but I can't. Ruth looked at Clara, her eyes pleading. I have to take it back. I'm sorry. I can't risk her life. Clara's chest ached. I understand. Do you? Ruth's voice was desperate. Because I don't think you do. I don't think you understand what it's like to have someone you do anything to protect. Clara's throat tightened. I do, actually. Ruth looked at her for a long moment, then shook her head. I'm sorry. I truly am. But I can't help you anymore. She left before anyone could stop her. Eleanor turned to Clara. This changes things. How? Without Ruth's testimony, we don't have enough to go public. Dalton knows it. That's why he targeted her. Adrian appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. He's not stopping with Ruth. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I just got word from 2 other suppliers. Both recanted their statements, both citing threats from Dalton's men. Clara's hands curled into fists. He's cleaning house. Exactly. Adrian's jaw was tight. And once he's done, he'll come for us. Then we hit him first, Clara said. Both Adrian and Eleanor looked at her. How? Eleanor asked. Clara's mind raced. We make him think we still have leverage, that we have something he wants, something big enough to make him back down for good. Like what? I don't know yet, but we figure it out fast. Adrian shook his head.
That's too risky. We need to pull back, regroup. There's no time to regroup. He's moving now. If we wait, we lose. And if we move without a plan, we're dead. Then we make a plan. Clara turned to Eleanor. You know this business better than anyone. What does Dalton need to operate? Eleanor was quiet for a moment, thinking. Legitimacy. He can extort and threaten all he wants, but if the county authorities actually investigate him, he's finished. He relies on fear to keep people quiet. But if someone credible, someone with real power, challenged him publicly, it would destroy his operation. Who would that be? Clara asked. The territorial governor. He's due to visit next week for the spring assembly. Adrian straightened. If we could get the governor to investigate Dalton, he'd have no choice but to stand down. Eleanor finished. But getting an audience with the governor isn't easy. He's surrounded by aides and handlers, and he only meets with people of significant standing. Clara's heart sank. So we're back to nothing. Not necessarily. Eleanor's eyes gleamed. I have connections. Old ones. From when my husband was alive. If I call in a few favors, I might be able to arrange a meeting. How long would that take? Adrian asked. 2 days? Maybe 3. We don't have 3 days. Then I'll make it happen in 1. Eleanor swept out of the room, already planning. Adrian turned to Clara. This is dangerous. Everything we've done has been dangerous. This is different. If Dalton finds out we're going to the governor, he won't. Not if we're careful. Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't like this. You don't have to like it. You just have to trust me. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, I do. That's what scares me. But Eleanor pulled strings faster than Clara thought possible. By the next afternoon, she had secured a meeting with the governor, not at the assembly, but privately at his hotel in town. We have one shot at this, Eleanor said as they prepared to leave. One chance to convince him that Dalton is a threat worth investigating. If we fail, there's no second chance. We won't fail, Clara said, more confidently than she felt. Eleanor looked at her appraisingly. You've got steel in you, girl. I'll give you that. They rode to town in Eleanor's carriage, Clara, Adrian, and Eleanor, all dressed in their best. Clara felt ridiculous in the borrowed dress, too fine and too clean for someone like her. But she wore it anyway. The governor's hotel was the nicest building in town. 3 stories, brick facade, windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. A doorman stood at the entrance, eyeing them as they approached. Eleanor handed him a card. Lady Eleanor Hale, we have an appointment. The doorman checked his list, nodded, and let them in. Inside, the lobby was all polished wood and expensive rugs. A man in a suit approached them immediately. Lady Hale, the governor is expecting you. This way, please. They followed him up a grand staircase to a private sitting room on the 2nd floor. Governor Thomas Marshall stood as they entered, a tall, silver-haired man with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone used to power. Lady Eleanor's, he said, shaking her hand. It's been too long. Indeed, Governor. Thank you for seeing us on such short notice. Of course. Though I admit, your message was intriguing. His gaze shifted to Clara and Adrian. And these are? My son, Adrian, and Clara Whitmore, who works with us. The governor nodded politely, but his eyes lingered on Clara with curiosity. Please, sit. They sat. The governor settled into a chair across from them. Now, what's this about? Eleanor launched into the explanation. Dalton, the extortion, the threats, the systematic destruction of their supply network. She spoke clearly, methodically, laying out facts without embellishment. The governor listened without interrupting. When Eleanor finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, These are serious allegations. They're not allegations, they're facts. Do you have proof? Eleanor's jaw tightened. We had testimony from multiple suppliers, but Dalton threatened them into recanting. So you have nothing. We have enough to warrant an investigation. The governor sighed. Lady Eleanor, I understand your frustration, but without concrete evidence, there's nothing I can do. Dalton operates within the bounds of the law. He operates outside it, Clara interrupted. The governor's eyes shifted to her. Excuse me? Clara's pulse hammered, but she didn't back down. He operates outside the law, and everyone knows it, including you.
The room went silent. Adrian tensed beside her. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. The governor's expression hardened. Young lady, I don't care what you appreciate. Clara leaned forward. You asked for proof. Here's your proof. Dalton has been extorting businesses for years. He's beaten people, threatened families, destroyed livelihoods, and the only reason he's still operating is because people like you look the other way. That's enough, the governor said sharply. No, it's not. Clara's voice was steady, unflinching. You came here to oversee this county, to make sure it operates fairly, but you can't do that if you ignore what's happening right under your nose. The governor stood. I think this meeting is over. Wait. Eleanor stood as well. Governor, please, just listen. I've listened enough. His voice was cold. And unless you have actual evidence, not hearsay, not accusations, but proof, there's nothing more to discuss. Clara's stomach sank. They'd failed, but then Adrian spoke. What if we could get you proof? The governor paused. What kind of proof? Documents, records, evidence of illegal transactions. Adrian's voice was calm, measured. Would that be enough? The governor studied him for a long moment. If the evidence is solid, yes, it would be enough. Then give us 48 hours. To do what? To get what you need. The governor's eyes narrowed. And how do you plan to do that? Adrian's jaw tightened. Better you don't know. The governor looked between them. Eleanor's tense expression, Clara's determined face, Adrian's unyielding gaze. Finally, he nodded. 48 hours. But if you don't deliver, this conversation never happened. Understood? Understood. They left the hotel in tense silence. Once they were back in the carriage, Eleanor turned to Adrian. What are you planning? Adrian's face was grim. Something stupid. Adrian, Dalton keeps records. He has to, for his own protection. Proof of who he's paying off, what he's collecting. Insurance in case someone turns on him. Clara's eyes widened. You're talking about breaking into his warehouse. Yes, that's insane. It's the only option we have. Eleanor shook her head. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. I know. Then why? Because if we don't do this, Dalton wins. He destroys us financially, runs us out of business, and then he moves on to the next target. Adrian's voice was hard. I'm not letting that happen. Clara's mind raced. If we're doing this, we need a plan, a real one. We can't just walk in there. I know. Adrian looked at her. Which is why I need you to stay behind. Clara's heart stopped. What? This is too risky. If something goes wrong, then you'll need backup. Clara, I'm coming with you. Her voice was firm. We do this together or not at all? Adrian stared at her, frustration and something else warring in his eyes. You're impossible. So are you. Eleanor sighed. If you're both determined to get yourselves killed, at least do it intelligently. We'll need a distraction, something to draw Dalton's guards away from the warehouse. Adrian nodded slowly. I can arrange that. How? Clara asked. Better you don't know. Clara wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. When do we move? Eleanor asked. Adrian checked his watch. Tonight, midnight, before Dalton realizes what we're planning. The hours before midnight crawled by. Clara tried to rest but couldn't. Her mind kept racing, running through every possible scenario, every way things could go wrong. Finally, she gave up and went to find Adrian. He was in the study, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. Can't sleep? He asked without looking up. No. Me neither. Clara sat down across from him. Are you scared? Adrian's hand stilled. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Terrified. The honesty of it surprised her. You don't seem it. That's because I've had practice hiding it. He set the rifle aside. But yes, I'm scared. For you, for my mother, for what happens if this goes wrong. Then why are we doing it? Because the alternative is worse. Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I've spent years watching this place. watching the people who depend on us struggle to survive. And I've done everything I could to protect them. But Dalton, he's different. He doesn't just want profit. He wants control. And if we let him have it, there's no coming back. Clara's chest ached. So we fight. So we fight. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Clara said quietly, "If something happens to me tonight, don't. Adrian, I mean it, don't." His voice was rough. "Because if you start talking like that, I'll lock you in your room and do this alone." Clara's throat tightened. "You can't." "Watch me." She stood and crossed to him, kneeling in front of his chair so they were eye level. "I'm not saying this to be dramatic. I'm saying it because it needs to be said. If something happens to me, I need you to know that I don't regret any of this. Not coming here, not fighting, not—" She paused. "Not you." Adrian's eyes were dark, intense. "Clara, I mean it. You gave me something I didn't think I'd ever have. A place, a purpose, something worth fighting for." Her voice broke slightly. "And I'm grateful for that, even if it ends tonight." Adrian's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "It's not ending tonight, because we're both walking out of there alive, together. Understood?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. "We're going to be okay," he murmured into her hair. Clara closed her eyes and let herself believe him. Just for a moment, sobbed. Midnight came too fast. Clara and Adrian rode toward the warehouse in silence, dressed in dark clothing, weapons concealed. The moon was hidden behind clouds, the night thick and oppressive. Half a mile from the warehouse, they dismounted and continued on foot. Adrian had arranged for a fire to be set in a storage shed on the far side of town. Nothing dangerous, but enough to draw attention. Enough to pull Dalton's guards away. They waited in the shadows, watching. Right on schedule, shouts erupted from across town. Fire bells clanged. Within minutes, 2 of the warehouse guards ran off toward the commotion. Only 1 remained. Adrian and Clara moved quickly, circling around to the back entrance. Adrian picked the lock with practiced ease, and they slipped inside. The warehouse was dark, lit only by a few dim lanterns. Crates and machinery cast long shadows. They moved silently toward the office at the back, the place where Dalton kept his records. The door was locked. Adrian knelt and started working the lock while Clara kept watch. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Every creak, every sound felt amplified. The lock clicked open. They slipped inside. Dalton's office was cluttered, papers stacked haphazardly, ledgers piled on the desk, a safe in the corner. "Check the desk," Adrian whispered. "I'll handle the safe." Clara started rifling through papers, looking for anything that resembled proof. Ledgers, transaction records, names and amounts. She found a ledger labeled Payments and flipped it open. Inside were rows of names, county officials, law enforcement, even a judge. Next to each name was a dollar amount and a date. Bribes. "Adrian," she hissed, "I found something." He looked up from the safe. "What?" "Proof, names, amounts, everything." Adrian crossed to her, scanning the ledger. His face went hard. "This is it. This is what we need." A floorboard creaked behind them. They both froze. "Well, well," a voice drawled. "What do we have here?" They turned slowly. Marcus Dalton stood in the doorway, a pistol in his hand, his expression cold and triumphant. "I have to admit," Dalton said, stepping into the room, "I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to actually try this, but here you are." His smile was cruel. "Breaking into my property, stealing my records. That's a crime, you know." Adrian's hand moved toward his gun, but Dalton cocked his pistol. "Don't! I'd hate to shoot you before we have a chance to talk." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Dalton's gaze shifted to Clara. You're the one who bluffed me, made me think you had leverage." He laughed. "Smart, real smart, but not smart enough." Clara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "The governor knows we're here." "No, he doesn't." Dalton's smile widened. "You think I don't have eyes everywhere? I knew the moment you left his hotel. Knew you'd try something desperate. So I waited. He gestured with the gun.
And here you are, gift wrapped. You won't get away with this, Adrian said. Won't I? Dalton's voice was mocking. Who's going to stop me? You? You'll be dead. Her? Same. And without proof, the governor won't touch me. We have proof, Clara said, holding up the ledger. Had proof. Dalton fired. The bullet slammed into the ledger, ripping it from Clara's hands and sending it flying across the room. Clara stumbled back, her ears ringing. Adrian lunged. Dalton fired again, but Adrian was already moving. The bullet went wide, shattering a window. Adrian tackled Dalton to the ground, and the gun skittered across the floor. Clara dove for it. Her fingers closed around the grip just as Dalton threw Adrian off and lunged at her. She swung the pistol up. Dalton froze, his eyes locked on the barrel. Don't move, Clara said, her voice shaking but her grip steady. Dalton's lips curled into a sneer. You won't shoot me. You sure about that? Yeah, I am. He took a step forward. Because you're not a killer, sweetheart. You're just a scared little girl playing at being tough. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. Try me! Dalton lunged. Clara fired. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Dalton dropped, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Clara stood frozen, the gun still raised, her entire body shaking. Adrian was beside her in an instant, taking the gun from her trembling hands. It's okay. You're okay. Clara's vision swam. I shot him. You had to. Footsteps pounded outside, guards returning, drawn by the gunshots. We need to go, Adrian said urgently. Now. He grabbed the damaged ledger from the floor, still readable, still useful, and pulled Clara toward the back exit. They ran. Behind them, Dalton's voice roared, ordering his men to find them, to kill them, to burn everything. Clara and Adrian burst out into the night, running for the horses, the ledger clutched tight. They mounted and rode hard, not stopping until the warehouse was miles behind them. Only then did Clara let herself breathe. Only then did the reality of what she'd done crash over her. She'd shot someone, actually pulled the trigger. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Adrian pulled his horse alongside hers, his eyes searching her face. Are you hurt? No? Clara? I shot him, Adrian. I actually shot him. You had no choice. Didn't I? Adrian brought both horses to a stop and dismounted, pulling Clara down after him. He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. If you hadn't fired, he would have killed you, killed both of us. You did what you had to do to survive. His voice was firm, unwavering. That's not murder. That's not wrong. That's survival. Clara's eyes burned. It doesn't feel like survival. I know. Adrian pulled her into his arms. But it is. And we're both alive because of you. Clara buried her face in his chest, her body shaking with adrenaline and shock and something she couldn't name. We got the ledger, Adrian said quietly. We got what we needed. It's over. But even as he said it, Clara knew it wasn't true. Because somewhere behind them, Marcus Dalton was alive, wounded, furious, and planning his revenge. Because somewhere behind them, Marcus Dalton was alive, wounded, furious, and planning his revenge. Clara pulled away from Adrian's embrace, wiping her face with shaking hands. We can't go back to the estate. Adrian frowned. What? He knows where we live. He'll send his men there. We need to get this ledger to the governor before Dalton can regroup. Adrian looked down at the blood-stained book clutched in his hand, then back at Clara. It's the middle of the night. The governor won't see us. Then we make him see us. Clara's voice was steadier now, the shock burning away into something sharper. We go to his hotel. We wake him up if we have to. But we get this to him before sunrise. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, but we can't go like this. He gestured to their torn, dirty clothes, the blood on Clara's sleeve from where she'd scraped against the window frame. We look like criminals. We are criminals. We just broke into a warehouse and stole documents. Borrowed documents. Tell that to the judge. Clara took a shaky breath. But you're right. We need to clean up, make ourselves presentable. They rode to a boarding house on the edge of town. One Adrian knew, run by a widow who didn't ask questions.
They paid for a room and water to wash with, changed into the spare clothes they'd brought, and did their best to look like respectable citizens instead of fugitives. It wasn't perfect. Clara's hand still trembled when she tried to button her dress, and Adrian had a cut above his eye that wouldn't stop bleeding. But it was better than nothing. By the time they reached the governor's hotel, the sky was just beginning to lighten, not quite dawn, but close enough that the streets were starting to stir. The doorman tried to stop them. "The governor is not receiving visitors," he said firmly. "He'll receive us," Adrian said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Sir, I cannot—" Clara stepped forward, holding up the ledger. "We have evidence of corruption involving county officials. Names, dates, amounts. If the governor doesn't see us right now, those names include people he personally appointed." The doorman's eyes widened slightly. He hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." He disappeared inside. 5 agonizing minutes later, he returned. "The governor will see you, but you have 10 minutes, no more." They followed him upstairs to the same sitting room from before. Governor Marshall stood by the window, already dressed despite the early hour, his expression unreadable. "This had better be good," he said without preamble. Adrian held out the ledger. "It is." The governor took it, flipped it open, and started reading. His face went very still. The silence stretched. Then the governor looked up, his eyes hard. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" Clara asked. "Yes, because if this was obtained illegally—" "It was obtained from Marcus Dalton's private office," Adrian said flatly. "And before you ask, yes, we broke in. Yes, it's illegal, but everything in that book is real, verifiable. And if you check those names against your records, you'll find they match." The governor's jaw tightened. He turned back to the ledger, reading more carefully now. His expression darkened with each page. Finally, he closed the book and looked at them. "Some of these names are people I trust, people I've worked with for years." "Then you trusted the wrong people," Clara said quietly. The governor's gaze sharpened. "You're asking me to believe that half my administration is corrupt. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm showing you proof. Proof that could have been forged." "By who?" Adrian's voice was cold. "Us? 2 people with no connections, no resources, no reason to fabricate something this elaborate? Unless you're working for Dalton's competitors." Clara's temper flared. "We're not working for anyone. We're trying to stop a man who's been terrorizing this county for years. A man who beats people who cross him, who threatens families, who operates with impunity because people like you refuse to see what's right in front of you." The governor's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone." "Or what? You'll throw us out? Fine. Do it. But that ledger stays with you. And if you ignore it, if you let Dalton keep operating, then every life he destroys from here on out is on your conscience, not ours." The room went silent. The governor stared at Clara, something shifting in his expression. Then he looked down at the ledger again. "I'll need to verify these claims," he said finally. "How long will that take?" Adrian asked. "A day. Maybe 2. "We don't have 2 days. Dalton knows we took this. He'll disappear or destroy any other evidence before you can move." The governor's lips thinned. "Then what do you suggest?" "Arrest him. Now. Before he can run." "On what grounds? This ledger isn't enough for an arrest warrant, not without corroboration." Clara's frustration boiled over. "Then what do we need? What will it take for you to actually do something?" The governor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "A witness. Someone who can testify to Dalton's illegal activities, preferably someone with credibility." "Like who?" "Like one of the people he's been paying off." The governor tapped the ledger. "If we can get someone on this list to admit what they've done, it would give me enough to move." Adrian shook his head. "They'll never talk. They're too scared." "Then find someone who isn't." The governor's voice was firm. "Bring me a witness, and I'll bring Dalton down. That's the deal." Clara wanted to argue, to scream, to demand more, but she could see the governor wasn't going to budge. "Fine," she said. "Give us 24 hours." "You have 12. That's not enough time." 12 hours, the governor repeated. "Or I move without you, and if Dalton walks because the case falls apart, that's on you." Clara's hands fisted at her sides, but she nodded. 12 hours. They left the hotel as the sun was rising, exhaustion weighing on them like stones. How are we supposed to find a witness in 12 hours? Clara asked. Adrian was quiet, thinking. We go back to the people we know, the ones who've been hurt by Dalton. We convince one of them to speak up. They already refused. Ruth, the others, they're too scared. Then we make them less scared. How? Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. We show them that Dalton isn't invincible, that we already hurt him, that we can protect them if they help us. Clara's throat tightened. Can we? Protect them? I don't know, Adrian said honestly, but we have to try. They spent the next hours visiting every supplier, every merchant, every person who'd been touched by Dalton's operation. They showed them the ledger, explained what it meant, promised protection if they testified. Most refused. Too scared. Too beaten down. Too convinced that nothing would change. But one didn't. His name was Thomas Garrett, no relation to Mrs. Garrett, a freight operator who'd been paying Dalton protection money for 3 years. He was in his 50s, weathered and tired, with the look of a man who'd seen too much and had nothing left to lose. I'll do it, he said when Clara and Adrian approached him. Clara blinked. Just like that? Just like that. Thomas's voice was rough. My son died last year. Got caught in the crossfire when Dalton's men raided a competitor's warehouse. Bullet wasn't even meant for him. He was just there. Wrong place, wrong time. His eyes were hard. I wanted to testify then, but I was scared. Scared of what Dalton would do to my wife, my daughters. But my wife left me anyway. Couldn't stand living with a coward. My daughters won't speak to me. He looked at the ledger. I've got nothing left to lose, so yeah, I'll testify. Adrian's expression softened. We can protect you. Can you? Thomas's laugh was bitter. I don't need protection. I need Dalton gone. That's all I want. Clara's chest ached. We can make that happen. Then let's do it. They brought Thomas to the governor at noon, exactly 12 hours after their first meeting. The governor listened to Thomas's testimony with a stone face, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. When Thomas was finished, the governor sat back and exhaled slowly. This is enough, he said finally. With this testimony and the ledger, I can issue a warrant for Dalton's arrest. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. When? Immediately. I'll have the territorial marshal execute it within the hour. What about the people on Dalton's payroll? Adrian asked. The governor's expression hardened. They'll be investigated. Anyone found guilty of corruption will be removed from office and prosecuted. Including your own appointees? Including them. The governor's voice was firm. I don't tolerate corruption in my administration. If they're guilty, they'll answer for it. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, Clara let herself believe it might actually be over. The arrest happened fast. The territorial marshal, a broad-shouldered man named Carson, with a reputation for getting things done, rode out with 6 deputies to Dalton's warehouse. Clara and Adrian watched from a distance, hidden among the crowd that had gathered when word spread about what was happening. Dalton came out fighting. Not physically, he was too smart for that, but verbally, shouting about false accusations, illegal searches, conspiracies, but Carson didn't budge. He read the warrant loud enough for everyone to hear, listed the charges, and clamped irons around Dalton's wrists. The crowd murmured. Some looked satisfied, others looked nervous, but no one intervened. As Dalton was led away, he caught sight of Clara and Adrian in the crowd. His eyes locked onto Clara's and he smiled, cold, vicious. This isn't over, he mouthed. Clara's stomach twisted, but she didn't look away. Adrian's hand found hers and squeezed. It is for him, Adrian said quietly. News of Dalton's arrest spread through the county like wildfire. Within days, the corrupt officials named in the ledger started resigning or fleeing. Investigations were launched. The governor made a public statement condemning corruption and promising reform. The suppliers who'd been too scared to speak up before started coming forward, adding their voices to the growing chorus. Dalton's empire crumbled in less than a week, but for Clara, the victory felt hollow. She couldn't shake the image of Dalton's smile, the cold certainty in his eyes, the unspoken promise. This isn't over. You're thinking too much, Eleanor said one evening, finding Clara alone on the front porch. Clara glanced up. How can you tell? Because you've got that look, the one that says you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Eleanor sat down beside her. Dalton's in custody. His operation is finished. You won. Why can't you accept that? Because it doesn't feel real. Clara's voice was quiet. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for him to escape, or for someone to decide we're the real criminals. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You've spent your whole life expecting the worst. It's a hard habit to break. How did you break it? I haven't. Not entirely. Eleanor's smile was wry. But I've learned to recognize when I'm sabotaging my own happiness, when I'm so busy waiting for disaster that I forget to appreciate what I've built. Clara looked at the older woman. What did you build? This, Eleanor gestured to the estate. A place where people can work, thrive, build lives. It's not perfect, but it's mine, and I earned it. She looked at Clara. Just like you've earned your place here. Clara's throat tightened. I shot a man. To save your life. And Adrian's. That doesn't make it okay. No, but it makes it necessary. Eleanor's voice was firm. You did what you had to do. And because of that, Dalton's reign of terror is over. Families are safe. Businesses can operate without fear. That matters, Clara. Your actions mattered. Clara blinked hard against the burn in her eyes. I feel like a hero. Good, because heroes are myths. Real people are messy, complicated. They make hard choices and live with the consequences. Eleanor placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. But that doesn't make what you did any less important, Sam. That night, Adrian found Clara in the stables, her usual refuge when things got too overwhelming. You're hiding, he said. I'm thinking. Same thing. He leaned against the stall door beside her. Talk to me. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What happens now? What do you mean? Dalton's gone. The crisis is over. What happens to us? Adrian's expression softened. What do you want to happen? Clara's chest ached. I don't know. Yes, you do. You're just scared to say it. She looked at him, her heart hammering. What if I say it and it changes everything? What if you don't and we never know? Clara took a shaky breath. I want to stay, here, with you. But I don't know if that's allowed, if I've earned that. Adrian stepped closer, his hand cupping her face. You don't have to earn anything. You belong here. Not because you fought for it or proved yourself, but because this is where you're supposed to be. How do you know? Because I can't imagine this place without you anymore. His voice was raw, honest. You changed everything, Clara. The estate, my mother, me, and I don't want to go back to how things were before you showed up. Clara's vision blurred. I'm terrified. So am I. Of what? Of losing you. Of this not being real. Of waking up one day and finding out it was all temporary. Adrian's forehead rested against hers. But I'm more terrified of not trying. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt. I don't know how to do this. How to stay. How to trust that it won't all fall apart. Neither do I, but we figure it out, together. He pulled back just enough to look at her. If you want to. Clara's throat closed. I want to. Then stay. Okay. Okay. Yes. Clara's voice was stronger now. I'll stay. Adrian kissed her then, soft, careful, like she was something precious. And for the first time in her life, Clara let herself believe that maybe she was. The next morning, the governor's office sent word that they wanted to meet with Clara and Adrian again. Clara's stomach dropped. What now? Only one way to find out, Adrian said. They rode to town together, tension thick between them. The governor was waiting in his sitting room, but this time he wasn't alone. The territorial marshal was there, along with a man in a formal suit who introduced himself as the governor's chief legal advisor. Please sit, the governor said. Clara and Adrian sat. The governor folded his hands on his desk. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did. Dalton's arrest has already had ripple effects throughout the county. Several other criminal operations have been disrupted. Corrupt officials have been removed. It's significant. You're welcome, Adrian said carefully. However, the governor continued, there's the matter of how that evidence was obtained. Clara's pulse spiked. We already told you. I know what you told me, and legally, I should be prosecuting you for breaking and entering, theft, and several other crimes. The governor's expression was unreadable, but my legal advisor has convinced me that doing so would be, counterproductive. The advisor leaned forward. Given the circumstances and the public good that resulted from your actions, the governor is willing to issue a full pardon. No charges, no record. It never happened. Clara blinked. Just like that? Just like that. The governor's mouth quirked. Consider it a reward for your civic service. Adrian's eyes narrowed. What's the catch? No catch. But I do have a request. The governor pulled out a sheet of paper. I'm creating a task force to root out remaining corruption in the county. I want you both to serve on it. Clara's jaw dropped. What? You have insight into how these operations work. You understand the people involved, and you've proven you're willing to take risks to do what's right. The governor's gaze was steady. I need people like that. We're not investigators, Adrian said. You are now, if you accept. Clara looked at Adrian. He looked back at her, a question in his eyes. She thought about it, about everything they'd been through, everything they'd risked. And she realized something. She wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting for something bigger. We accept, Clara said. Adrian's eyebrows rose, but he didn't contradict her. Instead, he turned to the governor and nodded. We accept. The governor smiled, genuinely for the first time since they'd met him. Good. You start next week. Carson will coordinate with you on the details. They left the governor's office in a daze. Did we just agree to work for the government? Adrian asked. I think we did. Are we insane? Clara laughed, surprising herself. Probably. Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. You're sure about this? No, but I'm sure about us. And if this is what we're doing, then we're doing it together. Adrian's expression softened. Together. Together. Word of their new position spread quickly. The response was mixed. Some people praised them, called them heroes, thanked them for standing up to Dalton. Others were less generous, called them troublemakers, outsiders who didn't know their place. Clara tried not to care, but it was hard, especially when she overheard two merchants talking in the general store. That Whitmore girl. Who does she think she is? I heard she was just some runaway, no family, no connections, and now she's working for the governor? It's unnatural. Probably sleeping with the Hale boy. That's the only explanation. Clara's hands curled into fists. She wanted to confront them, to defend herself, but a hand on her shoulder stopped her. Mrs. Garrett. Ignore them, the older woman said quietly. They're just jealous. Of what? Of the fact that you did something they were too scared to do, that you stood up when they stayed silent. Mrs. Garrett's voice was firm. You earned your place here, Clara. Don't let anyone tell you different. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you. Mrs. Garrett nodded once and walked away. Clara took a breath, squared her shoulders, and finished her shopping. That evening, Eleanor called a staff meeting, something she rarely did. Everyone gathered in the main hall, murmuring nervously. Eleanor stood at the front, her posture regal, her expression calm. I'm sure you've all heard by now that Clara and Adrian have been appointed to the governor's anti-corruption task force, she began. Murmurs of agreement. I'm also sure you've heard the gossip, the whispers, the speculation about why they were chosen and whether they deserve it. The room went quiet. Let me be very clear, Eleanor continued, her voice cutting through the silence. Clara Whitmore has earned every opportunity she's been given. She's worked harder than anyone I've seen. She's risked her life to protect this estate and everyone who depends on it, and she's proven herself to be intelligent, resourceful, and brave. Eleanor's gaze swept the room. If anyone here has a problem with that, you're welcome to leave, but you won't stay here and disrespect her. Not in my house. Understood?" Silence. Then, slowly, one of the stable hands started clapping. Another joined, then another. Within moments, the entire staff was applauding. Clara stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Adrian's hand found hers and squeezed. Eleanor met her gaze across the room and nodded once. "You belong here." For the first time, Clara believed it. A week later, Clara and Adrian started their work with the task force. It was hard, complicated, frustrating. They interviewed witnesses, followed leads, uncovered more corruption than they had expected. But they also made progress. Slowly. Carefully. But progress nonetheless. And through it all, they learned to trust each other in new ways. To lean on each other when things got overwhelming. To celebrate small victories and weather setbacks together. One night, after a particularly brutal day of interviews, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't taken me in?" Clara asked. Adrian was quiet for a moment. "All the time." And I can't imagine it, any of it." He looked at her. "You changed my life, Clara, in ways I didn't think were possible." Clara's chest ached. "You changed mine too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Adrian said, "I love you." The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. Clara's breath caught. "What?" "I love you," Adrian repeated, his voice steady. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first day when you looked me in the eye and didn't back down. Maybe later. But it happened, and I'm tired of pretending it didn't." Clara's hands shook. "Adrian, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." Clara turned to face him fully, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "I love you too." Adrian's eyes widened. "You do?" "Yes. I'm terrified of it. I don't know what it means or how to do it right. But I love you." Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "We'll figure it out," he murmured. "Together." "Together," Clara echoed. And in that moment, surrounded by the life she'd built, the man she loved, and the future she'd fought for, Clara finally let go of the fear that had defined her for so long. She stopped running. She stopped waiting for disaster. She chose to stay. And for the first time in her life, she was home. And for the first time in her life, she was home. Clara woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of horses in the paddock. For a moment, she just lay there, letting the peace of it settle over her like a blanket. No running, no hiding, no waiting for the world to collapse. Just this. She dressed quickly and found Adrian already in the kitchen, pouring coffee with one hand while reviewing a stack of documents with the other. "You're up early," she said. He looked up, a smile tugging at his mouth. "So are you." "Couldn't sleep." "Good dreams or bad?" "Good, actually." Clara accepted the coffee he handed her. "That's new." Adrian's expression softened. "Get used to it." They worked through breakfast, organizing their notes for the task force meeting scheduled later that week. The work was overwhelming. Testimonies to review, leads to follow, people to interview, but it felt purposeful in a way Clara had never experienced before. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building something. "We should talk about the Henderson case," Adrian said, tapping one of the files. "The marshal thinks there's enough evidence to move forward, but I'm not sure the testimony is strong enough." Clara leaned over to read the report. "What's missing?" "Corroboration. We have one witness, but Dalton's lawyer will tear them apart on cross-examination unless we find someone else who can back up their story." "So we find someone else?" Easier said than done. Henderson's operation was small. Not many people knew what he was doing. Clara frowned, thinking. What about his bookkeeper? Someone had to manage his finances. Adrian's eyes widened slightly. "That's actually brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?" "Because you were too focused on the obvious." Clara grinned. "Lucky for you, I see things differently." Adrian reached across the table and caught her hand. "Very lucky." Before Clara could respond, Eleanor swept into the kitchen, already dressed for the day. her expression businesslike. "Good, you're both here," she said. "We have a problem." Clara's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves 3 suppliers showing up at dawn asking for protection." Adrian stood. "From who?" "Dalton's associates. Apparently word's gotten out that he's naming names to reduce his sentence. His former partners are scrambling to cover their tracks, and that means eliminating anyone who might testify against them." Clara's chest tightened. "Where are the suppliers now?" "In the main hall, terrified. I told them we'd help, but I'm not sure how." Clara and Adrian exchanged glances. "We bring them to the marshal," Adrian said. "Get them into protective custody until the trials." "That could take months," Eleanor said, "and we don't have the resources to guard them that long." "Then we make resources," Clara said firmly. "We talk to the governor, explain the situation, get him to allocate funds for protection." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "You think he'll do that?" "He will if he wants his task force to succeed. We can't root out corruption if witnesses keep disappearing." Adrian nodded. "She's right. We push for it. Today." The suppliers were exactly as Eleanor described. Terrified, desperate, looking for any lifeline. Clara sat with them in the main hall, listening to their stories. How Dalton's men had shown up at their homes, made threats, made it clear that silence was the only path to survival. "We thought it was over when they arrested him," one of them said, a woman named Margaret who ran a textile shop. "But it's not. It's worse, because now they know we talked." "You're safe here," Clara said. "For how long?" Margaret's voice shook. "You can't watch us forever, and the moment we're alone— "You won't be alone," Adrian said, entering the room. "We're taking you to the territorial marshal. He'll arrange protection until this is resolved." "And if it's never resolved?" another supplier asked, a man named Paul who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "What then?" Clara leaned forward. "Then we make sure it is. We keep fighting, we keep testifying, and we don't let them win." "Easy for you to say," Paul muttered. "You've got the Hale name protecting you. We've got nothing." "You've got us," Clara said firmly, "and we're not abandoning you." Paul looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for something. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right, but if this goes south, it won't." Getting the suppliers to the marshal took most of the morning. Getting the governor to approve funding for their protection took the entire afternoon. By the time Clara and Adrian returned to the estate, exhausted and frustrated, the sun was setting. "He's stalling," Adrian said as they dismounted. "The governor. He doesn't want to commit resources. He'll commit them when he realizes the alternative is watching his entire task force collapse." "And if he doesn't?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Then we fund it ourselves." Adrian stopped walking. "We can't afford that." "We'll figure it out." Clara turned to face him. "We didn't come this far to let bureaucracy stop us." Adrian stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "You really believe that, don't you? That we can fix this? Don't you?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, small but genuine. "I'm starting to." Over the next 2 weeks, the task force made significant progress. They secured protection for the witnesses, gathered enough evidence to bring charges against 5 more of Dalton's associates, convinced the governor to allocate additional resources. But the work was grueling, long hours, constant pressure, threats that came in the form of anonymous letters and veiled warnings. Clara felt it wearing on her, on both of them. One night, she found Adrian in the study, staring at a map of the county with pins marking every known criminal operation. "You should sleep," she said. "Can't. Too much to do." Clara walked over and gently removed the pen from his hand. "It'll still be here tomorrow." "Will it?" Adrian's voice was rough with exhaustion. "Because it feels like every time we close one operation, 2 more spring up, like we're trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon." Clara sat down beside him. "Then we get a bigger spoon." Adrian laughed, tired but real. "That's your solution? A bigger spoon?" "It's as good as any." Clara took his hand. "We're making progress, Adrian, real progress. Look at the map. 6 months ago, Dalton controlled half these territories. Now he's in prison. His network is crumbling. That's because of us. And how many more people have to suffer before it's gone completely?" I don't know, but fewer than would suffer if we gave up. Adrian looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed with fatigue. I'm tired, Clara. I know. I don't mean physically. I mean tired of fighting, tired of watching people get hurt, tired of wondering if we're actually making a difference or just delaying the inevitable. Clara's chest ached. Do you want to stop? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. No, I just needed to say it out loud. Okay. Clara squeezed his hand. Then we keep going. But we do it smarter. We delegate. We ask for help. We stop trying to carry everything ourselves. Adrian's mouth quirked. When did you get so wise? When I realized I didn't have to figure everything out alone. 1. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, from an unexpected source. One of Dalton's former lieutenants, a man named Victor Crane, approached the marshal with an offer. He would testify against everyone involved in the operation in exchange for a reduced sentence and relocation. The marshal brought him to Clara and Adrian immediately. Crane was thin, nervous, with the look of someone who'd burned every bridge and knew it. Why should we trust you? Adrian asked. You shouldn't, Crane said bluntly. But you need me, and I need you. Explain. Crane pulled out a ledger, smaller than the one Clara and Adrian had stolen, but just as damning. This is everything. Every transaction, every payoff, every name. Dalton kept copies of everything for insurance. I managed to grab this before they cleaned out his office. Clara's pulse quickened. Why are you giving this to us? Because Dalton's associates are trying to kill me. They think I know too much. And they're right. Crane's voice shook slightly. I testify, you protect me. Simple as that. Adrian studied him. And we're supposed to believe you won't run the moment you're safe? I've got nowhere to run. My face is known in every criminal circle from here to the coast. I testify or I die. Those are my options. Clara looked at Adrian. He looked back, a silent question passing between them. We'll take the ledger, Clara said finally. But you stay in custody until the trial. No exceptions. Crane nodded. Fair enough. The ledger was everything Crane promised. With it, the task force dismantled 6 more operations, arrested 12 people, and recovered enough stolen goods to compensate dozens of victims. The trial started in early autumn. Clara and Adrian attended everyone, sitting in the gallery, watching as the people who'd terrorized the county for years faced justice. It wasn't perfect. Some defendants got lighter sentences than they deserved. Some escaped on technicalities, but more were convicted than acquitted. And slowly, the balance of power shifted. The biggest trial was Dalton's. The courtroom was packed. Victims, reporters, curious onlookers. Clara sat in the front row, Adrian beside her, Eleanor on his other side. Dalton entered in chains, his shoulders still bandaged from where Clara had shot him. His eyes swept the room and landed on her. He smiled. Clara didn't look away. The trial lasted 3 days. Witness after witness took the stand detailing Dalton's crimes. The ledgers were entered into evidence. Victor Crane testified for 6 hours straight. Dalton's lawyer tried to discredit it all, but the evidence was overwhelming. On the 3rd day, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Clara sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, as the judge sentenced Dalton to 20 years in prison. It was over. Actually, finally over. When they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed them, shouting questions. Clara ignored them all and kept walking. Adrian caught up to her halfway down the street. You okay? Clara stopped and turned to face him. I don't know. I thought I'd feel something. Relief. Satisfaction. But I just feel empty. That's normal. Adrian's voice was gentle. You've been running on adrenaline for months. Now that it's done, your body doesn't know what to do. How long does that last? I don't know, but we'll figure it out, together. Clara leaned into him, letting him hold her weight. I'm tired. I know. But it was worth it, wasn't it? Adrian pulled back just enough to look at her. Yes, it was absolutely worth it. The aftermath of the trial brought changes Clara hadn't anticipated. The governor publicly commended their work. The county council voted to establish a permanent anti-corruption office, with Clara and Adrian as its first directors. People started recognizing them on the street, thanking them, asking for help with other problems. It was overwhelming, but it was also good. One afternoon, Clara was in town picking up supplies when a woman approached her. "You're Clara Whitmore, aren't you?" Clara tensed, expecting another confrontation. "Yes," the woman smiled. "I just wanted to say thank you. My husband was one of the suppliers Dalton was extorting. He was too scared to speak up, but after your trial, he found the courage. We're rebuilding our business now, because of you." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm glad. You gave people hope," the woman continued. "You showed us that standing up to bullies actually works. That's worth more than you know." She walked away before Clara could respond. Clara stood there, frozen, her chest aching with something she couldn't name. When she got back to the estate, she found Adrian in the stables, brushing down his horse. "Someone thanked me today," Clara said. Adrian looked up. "That's good, isn't it?" "I think so, but it felt strange, like I didn't deserve it." Adrian set down the brush and crossed to her. "Why not?" "Because I didn't do it for them. I did it because I was angry, because I was scared, because I wanted to survive. And in the process, you helped them survive too." Adrian's voice was firm. "That's not selfish, Clara. That's human." Clara's eyes burned. "I just wanted to be safe. And now you are. And so are they. That's allowed to be enough." 6 months after Dalton's trial, Eleanor announced her retirement. "I'm tired," she said simply, gathering Clara and Adrian in the study. "I've spent 40 years running this estate, building it, protecting it, and I'm ready to let someone else take over." Adrian's eyes widened. "Mother, I'm not dying, Adrian. I'm just stepping back." Eleanor's voice was calm. "And I want you to take over, both of you." Clara's heart stopped. "Both of us?" "Yes. This estate needs fresh leadership, new ideas, and you two have proven you can work together, that you can handle pressure, that you can build something that lasts." Eleanor looked between them. "Unless you don't want it." Adrian looked at Clara. "Do you?" Clara's mind raced. A few months ago, she would have said no immediately, would have insisted she didn't belong, didn't deserve it, wasn't capable. But now she looked around the study, at the maps on the walls, the ledgers on the shelves, the legacy Eleanor had built, and she thought about what it could become, what they could build together. "Yes," Clara said. "I want it." Eleanor smiled. "Good. Then it's settled." The transition took time, learning the business, understanding the finances, building relationships with suppliers and workers. But Clara and Adrian did it together, leaning on each other when things got hard, celebrating small victories, weathering setbacks. They made mistakes, plenty of them. But they learned, and slowly the estate transformed. They opened it up to people who needed work, refugees, former criminals trying to rebuild their lives, anyone willing to put in the effort. They renegotiated contracts to make them fairer, invested in better equipment, created apprenticeship programs. They turned it from a place of survival into a place of opportunity. And people noticed. 1 year after taking over, Clara stood on the front porch watching new workers arrive. A family fleeing poverty, a young man recently released from prison, an older woman who'd lost everything in a fire. Adrian came up beside her, slipping his hand into hers. "You did this," he said quietly.
Clara shook her head. "We did this. You inspired it." Clara looked at him, her heart full. "I just wanted a place to belong. And now you've created a place where other people can belong too." Clara leaned into him, watching the newcomers settle in, and felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Not the absence of struggle. There would always be challenges, always be work to do. But the certainty that she was where she was supposed to be, that she'd built something real, that she was home. The wedding was small, just family and close friends, gathered in the estate's main hall on a crisp autumn afternoon. Clara wore a simple dress, cream-colored, elegant but not ostentatious. Eleanor had offered her a more elaborate gown, but Clara had refused. "I'm not pretending to be something I'm not," she'd said.
Eleanor had smiled. Good. Now standing at the front of the hall with Adrian beside her, Clara felt more herself than she ever had. The ceremony was brief. No elaborate vows, just honest promises. To stand together, to build together, to choose each other, every day, even when it was hard. When it was over, Adrian kissed her, gentle, reverent, like she was the most precious thing in the world. The room erupted in applause. Clara pulled back, laughing, her eyes wet. "We did it," she whispered. Adrian grinned. "We did." That night, they stood together on the porch, watching the stars. "Do you ever think about where you'd be if you hadn't come here?" Adrian asked. Clara was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes, but not as much as I used to." "Why not?" "Because I'm not that person anymore. I'm not running, I'm not hiding, I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop." She looked at him. "I'm just living." Adrian's expression softened. "I'm glad." "Me too." They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Clara said, "I want to do more." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "More than running an estate and fighting corruption?" "I want to create a fund for people like me, people who have nothing but need a chance, help them get on their feet, find work, build lives." Adrian studied her face. "You're serious?" "Completely." "It'll be expensive, complicated." "I know. We'll probably fail a dozen times before we get it right." "I know that too." Adrian smiled. "Then let's do it." The fund launched 6 months later. It started small, helping 3 families relocate, funding 2 apprenticeships, covering medical bills for a young woman injured in a factory accident. But word spread. More people applied. More donors contributed. The governor endorsed it publicly. Within a year, it had helped over 50 people. Clara managed it herself, interviewing applicants, reviewing cases, making decisions about who to help and how. It was hard work. Emotionally draining, sometimes heartbreaking when she had to turn people away, but it was also the most meaningful thing she'd ever done. One afternoon, a young girl came to the estate, maybe 15, ragged and scared, with a story that sounded disturbingly familiar. Abusive stepfather. Nowhere to go. Desperate for any kind of help. Clara sat with her in the kitchen, listening without judgment, without interruption. When the girl finished, Clara said quietly, "You're safe here. We'll find you work. A place to stay. Whatever you need." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because someone did it for me once." Clara's voice was steady. "And now it's my turn to pass it forward." The girl nodded, crying openly now. Clara reached across the table and took her hand. "You're going to be okay. I promise." Bam. 5 years after Clara first arrived at the estate, she stood in the same spot where she'd first met Eleanor, the front porch, looking out at the endless fields and mountains. But everything was different now. The estate was thriving. The fund was helping hundreds of people. The county was safer, fairer, more hopeful than it had been in decades. And Clara was no longer the desperate, terrified girl who'd shown up with nothing but a stolen chance at survival. She was a leader, a partner, a force in her own right. Adrian came up beside her, their daughter balanced on his hip, 2 years old, dark-haired and curious, with her mother's fierce determination already evident. "She wants to see the horses," Adrian said. Clara smiled and reached for her daughter. "Of course she does." They walked to the stables together, their daughter babbling excitedly. As they passed the barn, Clara saw the young girl she'd taken in months ago, now working confidently alongside the other staff, laughing at something one of them said. The girl caught Clara's eye and waved. Clara waved back, her chest warm. "You're thinking about something," Adrian said. "Just how far we've come." "Do you regret any of it?" Clara looked at him. At the man who'd challenged her, protected her, loved her. At their daughter, who represented everything they'd built together. At the estate, transformed from a fortress into a sanctuary. "No," she said firmly. "Not a single moment." Adrian smiled and kissed her forehead. "Good. Because I don't either." They stood there together, watching their daughter reach toward the horses with delighted squeals, and Clara felt the last piece of fear she'd carried for so long finally release its grip. She'd done more than survive. She'd built a life, a legacy, a home. And in doing so, she'd proven that the most powerful thing a person could do wasn't just endure the harshest worlds. It was transform them. One bold choice at a time.